What is happening, guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are looking ahead to the Battle of Britain, England versus Scotland at Wembley, Friday night, 8 p.m. kickoff. Obviously, England have got off to a good start with a 1-0 win against Croatia. The Scots not so good with a 2-0 loss to the Czech Republic at Hampden. And joining me today is co-host George to look ahead to the game. So, George, what before we get into sort of the tactics, lineup, personnel, etc., what challenges do you expect Scotland to pose to us, and how do you expect this game to differ from what we saw against Croatia on Sunday?
Well, firstly, I think it's going to be a very aggressive affair. There'll be nothing left on the pitch afterwards. It's pretty much hit or bust for Scotland, isn't it? Really, and could subsequently put us in trouble if we ended up losing this game. The last time we played them, I think, was a 2-1 win for England, I want to say, which wasn't that long ago, actually. I remember them scoring an outrageous free kick when we played them at Hampden Park. And I think Sturridge scored in very late on. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough affair. Scotland are going to leave nothing, no stone unturned. And they actually played some really good football in their first game. I watched it. I watched it from start to finish. I think they got unlucky, with one of the goals, and there's nothing they could do really about the chip. The goalkeeper shouldn't have been off his line, but it's a stunning effort. Still, probably the goal of the tournament. So they've got plenty of positives. I expect, like I said in the previous, pod with the initial match, I think there's going to be a lot of changes. I think I wouldn't be surprised if I saw 5 or 6 changes, based just purely on what Southgate referred to in his press conferences before the Euros kicked off, where he was saying that he wanted to manage his squad more efficiently, particularly in the group stage, because I think he feels as though we should go at least semi-final stage, in which case he doesn't want us to burn out. So those key players. I think probably the most interesting concept of it all will be not just the lineup, but Harry Kane and how he manages that. Because if he has another quiet one, I wonder if he'll take him off slightly earlier and give Calvert-Lewin a bit more of a game, because if Harry Kane doesn't get off the score sheet, that's slightly concerning, considering we don't really have a plan B. We kind of put all our hopes on Harry Kane performing, but other than that, mate, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good, passionate, all British affair.
Yeah, I'm expecting this one to be a lot more of a physical encounter, which obviously leads me onto personnel, formation, tactics, etc. Obviously, Southgate sprung a little bit of a surprise with Kieran Trippier at left back. Are you expecting Trippier to retain his place at left back going into the Scotland game?
No, I don't think so. I think that could have potentially just been for that Croatia game, and I'm going to stick to that. Southgate could prove me wrong, and he might again go for experience. But I feel as if if he doesn't then play Chilwell or Shaw, I expect he'll pick Shaw for the game against Scotland. Then it leaves the question: well, when is he going to use the left backs, and why has he even selected one of them at all? He could have easily just removed one if he was going to play Trippier at left back that entire time. And the other one, of course, is Maguire, who claims that he's fit. And if he is fit, I expect him to be in the starting lineup for exactly as you said, for that physical presence at the back.
So you would expect Maguire to go straight back in and replace Tyrone Mings, I would imagine.
I think so. I think Mings was purely in just because Maguire was injured. As well as Mings did in his first game, he wasn't tested for one. I don't think Croatia tested him. Again, it's man management, so I couldn't argue for or against either, because if he didn't play Maguire and played Mings, I wouldn't argue against that and say, well, let's rest Maguire for those more important games, thinking that we've got this in the bag. But we can't take anything for granted, mate. I mean, we've still got to get this win. And I think if Maguire's fit, you play your best players in the tournament. That's how I see it. But again, if he ends up playing Maguire and then he gets injured, of course, everyone's then going to get on the bandwagon. Why did you risk it?
And in terms of, obviously, we've touched on the left-hand side of things. In terms of the right-back area, you expecting Kyle Walker to play again, or do you think we could see some action for Reece James?
I think we'd probably see Reece James if we were in a comfortable position within the game. If we're winning 2-0 and we're approaching the last 20 minutes, I'd expect Reece James to come on. But for me, again, I think when it comes to particularly the back four, I think you can tinker a bit up the top end of the pitch, but I think the back four or five or three, however you want to call it, I think Kyle Walker's a shoo-in. I think he has to play every game, bar an injury. So I wouldn't expect that to change. But then again, mate, who knows? I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah, I mean, that takes us on to the midfield, where again, it's going to be quite physical in there with the likes of Scott McTominay and John McGinn in and amongst the midfield for Scotland. You expecting, if Southgate persists with the 4-2-3-1, would you imagine it will remain unchanged with Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips? I think that too works pretty well in against Croatia. So leave that unchanged.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest surprise for me. Calvin Phillips, he played outstandingly well in that first game. So for me, he deserves a second game. Rice, I didn't see enough of Rice to suggest that he should be starting. But then again, I think when we're playing Scotland particularly, we're going to be cautious. Southgate does tend to play more cautiously. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went for two kind of more holding players than going for an attacking threat in that two, if he's going to play the 4-2-3-1. So yeah, again, mate, all over the pitch, other than maybe Kane. I mean, even Pickford may be questionable. He might even throw a complete curveball and maybe mix up the goalkeepers. I really don't know at this stage. I mean, I wouldn't personally, but I think from what I've heard, from what Southgate's been saying in podcasts and in interviews and everything else, I feel as if though there are going to be quite a few changes in significant areas. So, but until the lineup's out, we don't know.
Yeah, in terms of the goalkeeper, I don't think that will change, just because obviously Dean Henderson's had to pull out of the squad with a hip injury. So I can't really
I didn't know that. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't really see the likes of Sam Johnston or Aaron Ramsdale being given any minutes in the tournament. So I'd expect, barring injury, Pickford will retain his place throughout. But then again, George, as you said, there's multiple options going forward. I'd be very surprised if we saw the same front three in Kane, Sterling and Foden. Do you think this could be time to unleash my guy, Jack Grealish, for some minutes?
Yeah, 100%. Look, banter aside and personal opinions, you can't say that Jack Grealish doesn't deserve to be there. Fantastic season, very creative. He offers us something different. And for the opposition, he's unknown, unlike Sterling, where people have probably had more time to study how he plays for England and Manchester City. I think Jack Grealish is kind of the new kid on the block in a sense with his form. So definitely should get some minutes. Again, be difficult to leave Sterling out considering the performance he had and the fact that he scored the only and the winning goal. But maybe on the other side, he might change it, bring in Sancho or Grealish again. I would probably expect Grealish to feature but not start.
And possibly, obviously, Marcus Rashford came off the bench against Croatia. Do you think he's in contention for a start?
Start. Don't know. Not sure on that one. I think, again, he might be one that he feeds in if the game's a bit more comfortable and Scotland are struggling. I would expect more of the ball than Scotland. So I think that they will get tired, and therefore that's when you kind of bring on those pacey types of players, Sancho, your Rashfords, and that's where we can really expose them when they've lost their legs slightly. But like I said, mate, the big one's Harry Kane. I'm desperate for him to get off the score sheet, being our number 9, because we really don't have a plan B up there that's going to work. I don't trust Calvert-Lewin in a big game, so I expect Calvert-Lewin to also get more minutes, but I'm just desperate for Harry Kane to play well tomorrow.
And just one last thing on Jack Grealish. Do you think that there's a slight worry for Southgate that if he puts Grealish in due to the media pressure, because everyone wants Grealish to get on the pitch and play, that if he actually does well, then he's going to have to play him more when perhaps he's not really part of his plans? I think he prefers Sterling.
It's probably the hardest thing about being an international manager, isn't it? Because you haven't got 38 games to say, well, okay, Jack played well that game, but I can rest him for this cup game. It's tournament football. So yeah, by letting him play in a game against Scotland and say he comes on and scores, I mean, then he's put himself into a greater predicament of who he plays. So he's almost creating problems for himself. But these are good problems to have. It is to an outsider's point of view, no bias. It's a toss of a coin of who you would go for in preference. But for me, I still think Sterling because of the experience he has and the creativity he offers. But I would say Jack Grealish's finishing is probably better. So if only you could mold the two together, mate, and they could make one player, that would solve all the problems. But yeah, tough one, mate. Really tough.
And just a quick word on the Scots, obviously, before we wrap up. The like Premier League experience, the likes of Andy Robertson, Kieran Tierney, and Scott McTominay. Do you think they can pose a threat to England at all, or do you think this should kind of be one-way traffic and it should be fairly convincing?
Again, on paper, mate, it's convincing. But then I think in a tournament where Scotland, literally, this is the most important game of their group and you know, for a long, long time, I think it's even playing field. I really do. From what I've seen from Scotland, they played some good football. Okay, they lost in the end, and I would still expect the same. I'd expect them to probably start better, get out the blocks, be aggressive, but then they'll burn out, and I expect us for us to pick them off. But I think it is going to be a tight affair. But I rate them, and look, I've also got them in my work dues sweepstakes. So there's a little part of me that's hoping that they get through to the knockout stages. Obviously, it was great for Wales to do that as well, and I do have a bit of a soft touch for the home nations. I want all home nations to do well, but I think England just have too much. And I think, again, if we were not to get 3 points, I would be very disappointed.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'd have to agree. Just a quick score prediction, George. What are you going for?
I'm going to go for 2-1 to England. I think Scotland might get their first goal of the tournament, but I think England will have too much. 2-1.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 3-1. I think Scotland will score, but I think we'll have too much for them. But yeah, that brings an end to the preview. Obviously, let's hope it goes well on Friday night and England can make it 2 wins from 2. As always, guys, make sure you smash a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.